Welcome back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen, for another Sunday night show. Sunday night for me, anyway. So I got a request from a Patreon to cover this subject matter, and this is one that's intrigued me for quite a while. But I have to say I have been sort of limited in my knowledge of this particular conspiracy because I keep seeing it, and it comes up in different explanations. And now that I've kind of gotten into it, I feel like there's probably some reasons why it was sort of disinfoed and wiped away. As you can see, this is about Project Bluebeam. Not to be confused with Project Blue Book. We'll do one on that too. Bluebeam is a very specific conspiracy that involves the intelligence agencies working with space agencies to create a fake second coming. And I've mentioned this in different episodes, not realizing that that's exactly the charter of Project Bluebeam. And then some of you folks who know, you're like, oh, you're talking about Project Bluebeam. And I had unfortunately come in at a later point in time when they had scrambled with this gentleman who revealed this plan had originally set. And it was all about, projecting a fake moon and more of a Truman Show use of holograms as opposed to a true religious rebirth using this methodology. But I think that there's probably a lot of truth to this, and there's probably, obviously metric tons of crap that was attached to it afterwards. It all starts with a guy named Sergey Monastes, if I have his name correct. He's a Canadian, a French Canadian. And he got himself, he was a journalist, he was a poet, and he was a essayist. So Sergey is born in 1945. Nobody seems to know exactly where. It's not in his Wikipedia. He lives a fairly normal life until he gets into the social credit party of the Canadian government. And then in the 1990s hatches this conspiracy that he, just like Huxley, who wrote Brave New World, Alex Huxley, right? He basically said that he was exposed to secret societies, and, they like to brag. You get inside the Masons, I'm sure there's a bunch of shit, if you get into the right guys, and it just depends if your intelligence is higher than most within a Mason lodge or any other secret society. You will have the people that try to gain your credibility by trying to act as smart as you are. So there's two ways to do that. Either be as smart or smarter than the person you're trying to impress, or you pull out a bunch of, you know what I know? And they're trying to impress you because they're saying, I wouldn't be given this information if I wasn't stupid. And I know you're not stupid. So by proxy of association, I'm just as smart as you are, or at least I'm in your caliber. Let's chit-chat and be friends, right? He publishes a book called Project Bluebeam, and then parentheses NASA. And it essentially detailed that NASA and the United Nations, as well as obviously most military-industrial complexes of any advanced nature, were creating a program to scare everybody to death using the second coming. By saying, okay, once you have holograms that can be projected in the sky, we'll get into all this stuff and its practicality use of this thing. You have a lot of new options. I mean, just think about it. Just holograms that work in the normal atmosphere of the sky, whether it be by spraying a bunch of chemicals in the sky and then burning those chemicals in the sky, thus blocking light, and then projecting a light onto the burn, you get a temporary moment of like when you're at an amusement park, like Disneyland has a lot of water shows where they spray walls of water up at night and then project light on them, and it gives it a three-dimensional feel. It's very, very powerful. I've been to hundreds of those shows, right? But now when he hatches this story in 1994, which means he was getting the information in the 80s and then pining up to do this book, it's all from the eyeballs of the 90s, which is going to be difficult for anyone born in this decade or born in this century or born in that particular decade, and so you're 25 or whatever. If you want to know the difference between thought, just go look up your average I don't know, hip hop artist and what we were wearing back in those days in the late 80s, early 90s, there's no way to explain why we wore what we wore. I mean, it never looked good. It was fucking goofy as shit, and it was like we were trying or something. It's like post-apocalyptic clothing half the time, right? So when he writes about this, he talks about like a new age religion that this was going to create, this fake event of an apocalypse using all these different technologies. And you better believe if they would ever do something like this, it is every conceivable technology that is reliable and doesn't have a significant level of error rate. You have to know, too, that people like Shirley MacLaine made a ton of money in the 80s with a new age religion. And they just kind of either bite off of other people's guru work from the last several thousand years. They push it to the forefront. They create a nice little place to gather. People are tired of organized religion and pedophilia, so they're willing to go totally in on anything new. Like they feel their spirituality, but they're like, well, everything that's organized sucks. And so we're not going to do it. So they want something new. And man, you know, people get into religion because they're lost a lot of times. And that's not to say anyone religion is wrong or bad, but when you're searching, you join cults and do funny things, right? That's why by disenfranchising the youth of this world, horrible educational systems, fear-mongering them crazy, abusing their parents' ability to earn money to raise them well, thus more abuse starts happening at home, convincing couples that being married is the stupidest thing in the world, therefore, you know, some guys get all hard up and go after their kids. I mean, it's just horrible. It's easy to create the chaotic brain that needs to latch onto something. So in this particular case, we're really talking about the affluent and perhaps a small margin of normal human beings that would run after this kind of stuff. Now, what's interesting about it is immediately the Star Trek buffs of the world, who know that Gene Roddenberry wrote an episode called The God Thing, which was then brought up and finally published in Star Trek's Next Generation, called The Devil's Due. I've actually mentioned this episode. It's funny. The Devil's Due is about a woman who goes to a planet that had a philosophy of a second coming. Now, she's got a ship that's in stealth orbit really high up, and she is using her ship to create earthquakes and all of the sort of 7 plagues to complement their belief that she was going to come back and gain ownership of the world. And of course, Jean-Luc Picard and the gang find out that this is happening, and they eventually pincer her ship and figure out that she's actually a fraud. And at the very end, she even gets some of the occupants of the Enterprise worried that she's real. And that's a simulation of a second coming. It's an amazing thing. And again, why do you think Hollywood is so heavily controlled? Because the people that do us harm like people to incubate and think up and simulate things so that they can borrow from them. Remember the Colorado shooting in Aurora, California, or Colorado, where the kid goes in supposedly and shoots up the place with a gas mask on so he can not be identified until they throw his drug-infested body out the back door. He had nothing to do with it. And of course, he can't even talk. He can't walk. But supposedly 5 seconds earlier, he was blasting everybody in the movie theater. That's stolen from the movie called The Professional, or Leon, if you get the true Luc Besson cut of it, right? They steal them from movies all the time. So in 1996, he publishes another book, which I will not, the translation name is The Protocols of the Elders of Zion, where he talks about essentially the Masons for the last 20 years, and this is as of 1996, had been gathering, I mean, this is sort of silly, gathering the most powerful people in the world to come together to unify for this whole thing. Now, again, you could get some hearsay that's BS, and you could get some hearsay that's true. So it could be, I mean, we know that these powerful people, and this is 1996, the dude didn't have the internet to deal with ingesting information, really. And so he's dealing with, I mean, how does anyone wake up back in those days? For anyone who's awake in those days, John Carpenter, They Live, the fact that this dude was able to rub shoulders with enough people to understand how to create an alien version of what was really taking place, that we're all being indoctrinated, it's just phenomenal, right? So he needs a source in his mind for where this is coming from. And this was his source of the information. Somebody was in the Mason groups in Canada, and he got the information. But the idea is, if you're going to use technology to affect a change on society, then you have to get organized what that effect should be, I should say. Right? So if you're going to change everything, it's like, okay, you don't just go in and say, hey, I have long hair right now. I really want a different haircut. And the hairdresser goes, well, what do you want? And you go, I don't know, just do something. You don't do that, do you? You go and say, all right, a little bit off the end. Oh, we're going to go totally short. We're going to go bald, whatever it is. You know what you want to do. And so getting organized is a big deal. So perhaps the sort of hearsay that he got for the 20-year preparation is more of their camp, the Mason camp, to figure out, hey, if this technology is going to be used to create this event. And remember, all of the astronauts who faked their moon landings, they all had the Mason sickle and G thing, or the compass and the G, right? They all had that all over themselves. They're all 33-degree Masons. And again, I want to remind you guys, becoming a 33-degree Mason happens in two different ways at least, okay? One, you start off young, you pine your way through, and there's a few organizations outside the Masons, one of which Walt Disney was pushed into when he was a kid in Missouri. He got a little ring when he was like 14 or something, never did anything else. But then what they did was they called him up and said, you know what, we're awarding you 33-degree Mason membership. Now, some of you might go, well, there's proof. That's why the Disney organization is full of so many of these kid touchers. They took over his organization because what did he create? He created the world's finest gathering spot for kids. Permanently installed, not like a carnival, not like a circus that circles, tours around the world, but a permanent organization. It was a gigantic underground facility on top, below the main park. I mean, it was just right for the picking. But as I've told you, I've talked to people that knew Walt, and they can't get through 5 minutes of conversation without choking up. In their 70s, they're choking up saying, you have no idea the man we lost that day. And let's not forget, he goes in to get his throat looked at because he had a little bit of a thing in his throat. He dies almost instantaneously after that point. The guy I talked to him one of the last days anyone ever saw him, and he was dead within 72 hours, right? No one dies of throat cancer overnight. You don't, okay? You have to get diagnosed, you get a few surgeries, maybe you get the little kazoo in your throat, whatever it is, but you don't just die automatically. And that's what happened to Walt. Okay. So they award you 33-degree Mason things, and you have to understand it's a bit like being awarded a status within an organization that you do not reject because they own the cops, the judges, everybody. You would never come out and say, hey, these guys just gave me 33-degree Mason level. I reject that. You can't. If they call me up, my grandfather was a Mason in a little tiny country town named Chanute, Kansas. Apparently, I can send $15 to Topeka, Kansas, and find out sort of what it was. It's got to be a bunch of bullshit. My little town, it's got nothing. They do have Shriners, though, too, which apparently are over the Masons, I guess. I don't know. I don't know anything about it. But if someone called me up and told me, we put your picture up in the L.A. or Orange County lodge, you're in. I can't do fuck about it. I can't. If I start telling you guys this happened and I'm out and fuck those motherfuckers, I'd have problems for the rest of my life if I even lived that long. And Sergey did not live that long. So in 1995 to 1996, Sergey is telling the world, hey, I'm in trouble now for divulging this information. I'm being hunted by cops, everybody in authority. He had been charged with networks of prohibited information. Right? This is Canada. He had homeschooled his 2 kids, and he suddenly dies of a heart attack in December of 1996 at the age of 51. Okay, heart attack. Anybody remember the heart attack gun from the CIA? Remember that? Remember those Senate hearings? Hit you with a little ice dart and you have a heart attack? They don't have to shoot you with the gun. But there's a million ways to give you heart attacks. Hit you with a weapon from a van, poison your food, get that stuff in you, and you're done. Now, the other thing is the day before he has his heart attack, he's arrested and he's put in jail for a night. So that's the end of the official information about that guy that's online in Wikipedia. Now, when I heard about this, it was all about projecting false paradigms into the sky, one being the moon, like I said earlier. When you look up this stuff today, it is a myriad of videos about any anomaly in the sky. There are videos up there that show like a red-robed character moving through the sky. Lots of religious institutions have used hologram technology, some of it using water, some of it using the Pepper's Ghost thing that Tupac and I believe Michael Jackson's thing, which you can see in any haunted mansion from either Disneyland or Disney World. I have a lot of experience in holographic technology, from technology that burns air molecules and then projects on it in real time to all kinds of different layers of glass to just straight up left and right eye, either passive or active 3D LED surfaces or projectors, from domes to concave shapes to flat surfaces. I was in a heavy startup in this for 2 years, which we were just so ahead of our time. We invented the technology, got it perfected, and then realized that Hollywood's going to take another 10 years at the most aggressive pace to catch up with our tech. But now we got the metaverse, don't we? What's the metaverse? Guys have probably heard of it. You're on Facebook going, what the fuck is metaverse, right? Metaverse's objective is the following. It is to get kids to wear augmented reality glasses. Again, new technology, right? So this whole thing hatches for Sergey Monastes because there was a group of people that had perfected at least some really good introductory technologies for holographic technology in the sky and on stage. Remember, John Lear, who I have I don't know if I believe this guy, but he said that he saw, I believe it was Colin Powell, walk onto stage, introduce this technology show that he was going to see, and then he said everybody thought they were looking at Colin Powell or some commander, and he just vanished off the stage because the whole thing was holographic. There's people that say they've gone into hangars and they've seen fake bombers floating over their head, and they put their hands through it and they're not really there. Okay. At some point, holographic technology requires one basic element to be in place, and it has to do with left and right eye placement based on the position of the person in the room. So this is where it gets interesting. If you can actually burn in the air the equivalent of a solid object, which takes a tremendous amount of power, I'm telling you, if you're going to run lasers to the point where colliding lasers actually hit each other, and through the resonating frequency of the lasers, whatever frequency they're running at goes like 1,000x right when they cross or hit each other, and you start burning air, and then you have another projection system hitting it, you get an opaque pixel in the middle of the room. But the amount of power would be astonishing, in my opinion. I don't know how else you would do it. Plus, the array of lasers would have to be something that we have never seen in the private sector ever. We know that from movies that film going through a camera needs 24 frames a second to create the illusion of movement. They tell you this bullshit about your television needing 60 frames a second. That was to put you in a suggestive state of, or a state of suggestibility, so that when the commercials run and everything, you're getting brainwashed. And when the news is fake, you're just going, oh, this is all real, right? We only need 24 to really create the illusion of movement. So imagine every single conceivable pixel. You all know about resolution, right? If it was a 480p image in front of you, it looked like Mario Brothers. But once you get to 1080p and over, the brain starts having no discernible ability to distinguish reality from what the illusion is. But if you're going to create a 6-foot man in front of you using a hologram on a stage, that is really physically there. That way you don't have to worry about people from different angles not seeing it. Remember, Pepper's ghost only works in a 45-degree pie shape from direct center of stage. Okay, so all the other people, which is 55% of the audience, gets a weird twisted version of the Pepper's ghost effect. Which is why if you ever buy a ticket to see Tupac or Michael Jackson or something, either Vegas or otherwise, to see a holographic thing, they're not supposed to say it's holographic because holographic definition is different. That means it would be false advertising what you're seeing. The illusion, they can call it anything they want, but they can't call it holographic legally. But they also should be wiping away 55% of the stage seats so that everyone gets the illusion. Otherwise, you bought a ticket to a shitty experience. And you're just seeing them on stage in CG and getting excited, but you're not seeing them in 3D. So Sergey never said, as far as I know, exactly the technology that was being used. Obviously, I haven't read the book either. But he doesn't have to. We know that since this whole thing, and they don't even mention Project Bluebeam anymore when they mention this conspiracy. It's interesting how it's almost as if they panicked. They started harassing the guy, started charging him with bogus crap. They put him in jail, probably give him a little drink of poo, and he goes home and has a heart attack. However they do it. 51 years old. You can handle a lot of stress at 51, trust me. The other thing, too, is, let me ask you. Let's say you were a con artist, okay? And you wrote a book that starts causing you a lot of problems. The government's after you. I mean, because they charged him with some weird crap, it's proof they were on him, right? He could homeschool his kids all he wants, and that doesn't prove anything at all. The fact that he gets held overnight in jail and then released the next day and has a heart attack, they're on him. It sort of validates the whole claim. Now, I will say that there's people like Phil Schneider, who I have mentioned a lot, and I see a lot of accolades going out to Phil. He's a false hero, okay? Phil Schneider was a mentally ill person who was very well known in his town as being very mentally ill. The hand injury that he shows in the video that he claims where he went down into these underground bases with gray aliens down there, that hand injury was something he got, I think, when he was 17 years old, or at least late teens, early 20s, at a shipping dock because he wasn't paying attention. That injury was very, very old. That's why he shows you a photograph of a human being and says that it's an alien. It was all bogus, right? The idea that these aliens somehow live in these underground caves, just shitting and pissing down there, which is what he said, right? He said, oh, it smelled horrible in there. He's giving you elements to go, I never thought about that. It must be real. No. There are tunnels all over the world that they dig for the contingency of government and all kinds of other nasty stuff, perhaps, right? Perhaps, right? I don't have any proof. We'll see. The bomb in Beirut, the epicenter of the crater was a network of tunnels. That's pretty interesting, right? But creating a second coming is a very interesting thing, and it's a lot different than the alien one. We beat apart the logistics of an alien invasion. It's a whole episode on it, right? Go to deepthoughtsradio.com and click on aliens in the category list. But we're talking about a second coming. Well, not all religions have a second coming. In fact, very few do, Christianity being the only real one. And so if you were to total up the amount of Christians and the amount of other religions in this world, Christianity is a tiny minority of people on earth. Yeah, most first world countries, if there are religious people, which again is the secularism is all over this place, right? Israel is 80% atheist. But if you listen to all these cabal things, you would think that they were absolutely orthodox Jewish, believing everything that they're told. They may use those rituals to raise their children and have some tradition in their life, but my closest Jewish friends are like, yeah, well, I've been to Israel so many times, from America, I can't even count. And he goes, it's weird when we get over there because there's no religion. And one of my buddies, his family was religious, and so he said, we're kind of an outcast over there. Interesting. So let's just say, first and foremost, they were able to conduct this Project Bluebeam in a way that is absolutely believable to those who are Christian. You will see videos online of, again, like I said, Jesus kind of characters flying in clouds and then vanishing. It does look like either someone's doing a bad special effect where they got some CG model that's on an alpha channel and they just keep fading it in and out of existence, kind of making the clouds look like their clouds are going through the character. There was a video I watched in the last week here where it was looked like pale horsemen coming out of a storm. Anytime there's a tiny anomaly of a lightning storm, they'll slow down every single frame. You know, as a lightning bolt's coming down, it's casting all kinds of, snowflakes of shapes of, plasma discharging into the atmosphere. And they'll wait for one shape to kind of be like the devil's head or something. They'll see, look at that. That's them testing the Project Bluebeam technologies. One guy filmed a cluster of clouds in Oregon that were very thick and very, thundercappy. And there's sunbeams that are, because of the clouds are moving and reshaping. It was very turbulent up there. The sun is like hitting one side of a cloud formation that's only going to exist for like 5 seconds, right? And so it turns a really phosphorus color and then it goes away. Well, that's because the projection screen is changing its shape, just like the water in Disneyland getting a projection on it, right? The other one that's really bizarre is when they launch rockets, okay? There's a tremendous amount of vapor that comes off the back of a rocket. We've had launches here that we could see from SpaceX. The other videos are mysterious lights off the coast of like Miami. Well, Cape Canaveral's down there, okay? They're launching stuff constantly. There's one that was in the desert. Again, there's lots of desert launching locations. But they happened to shoot a camera right up the ass end of a rocket that's got a spinning fuselage. And so as it's spitting out its exhaust, it's creating a spiral. But they just happen to get the camera right up the hoo-ha of the rocket, and so it's making this beautiful spiral going away. And this stuff is constantly pitched as Project Bluebeam stuff. It's clickbait crap, clouding the overall story that may have had teeth at some point. Now, in the end, we're just going to kind of jump around a little bit. I do think that these intelligence agencies will experiment with everything. Someone comes up with some technology, and let's look at it from a New World Order methodology to, again, create a fake global event to affect change on the world. But then let's also look at the movie Wizards, where the bad guy was always projecting Hitler movies into the clouds above a battlefield so that when the demons were attacking the elves are looking up and they never see anything that like Hitler. And so it was preoccupying them while the demons rolled over them and killed them all. Well, imagine you're at war with somebody, and that somebody has a religious base. And so during the war, you start creating these effects in the sky. So maybe an Eastern Orthodox Russian army might start seeing their version of Christ or whatever other deities they come up with. Maybe it's a Middle Eastern Muslim group of images in the sky. Allah's coming down. Allah says, don't kill this, your 40 virgins are secure with me. Don't act against the enemy. That makes you lesser than him or whatever. And they put down their weapons and they get rolled over. So it doesn't have to be the overall charter that whoever told Sergey this story, that it would actually have to go down in that particular way. I think the technology most likely exists at this point because there have been, I have friends that are VC people, venture capital people, and they get into all kinds of projects. When people are looking for money, man, you find out how the world has really evolved. People with perpetual motor engines, hydrogen engines that run on water, that kind of stuff, because they see it, and then sometimes these people, they seem to all disappear, right? Or it gets swallowed up by a big corporation that sits on the technology, right? I don't think it's a mystery to most of you that oil companies buy up all the battery patents and then file them away. So you make a great battery that could run 1,000 miles for a Tesla car. If you do that, someone will come and get it, put it away. because it also hurts the battery industry that already exists, right? We want people to buy razor blades constantly for ridiculous amounts of money. But the logistical nature of a Christianity second coming for the rest of the world doesn't make any sense. Now, could we be the victim of a North American, South American, European distribution of this illusion? Because we're just talking about America, who is the United Nations, who is the UN, right? America is 90% of this, pretending as if it's a global organization. Why was it a big surprise during the last president of the United States that no one else pays a fair share for the UN maneuvers around the world? And the answer is because it's 99% an American organization pretending to invite everyone else to the club. The elite of Europe tell America what to do because we're the dipshit bully that goes around beating everyone over the head. So they want something to happen to somebody in the Middle East. A European old fart, pasty old fart, calls someone in the military-industrial complex, and they brew up a reason to go do this battle and knock down a couple buildings in New York, and we're on. The show's on, right? Of course, Zbigniew Brzezinski writes a book about it 3 years beforehand, or 4 years beforehand. But there's the other logistic that has to do with the episode I made on the alien invasion logistic, which is something I didn't realize until I made the episode. It came to me while I was talking to you guys. There is no Christianity that is allowed in China, for instance. Oh, they say there is, but there isn't, right? So why would President Xi in China allow the New World Order to create a Christianity second coming over China? Well, obviously they probably wouldn't. But they wouldn't want that to happen anyway. The CCP doesn't want any Christianity crap over their people. And what type of effort would it take to create an illusion over a country that's bigger than the United States? I mean, that's a whole lot of real estate you got to start dumping all this crazy illusion in the sky over. And to a marginal effect, because no one's like, that's not even our guy. What are you talking about? I don't even know who that dude is. Who's the guy with the beard and the robe? Oh, that's the American's savior. Oh, okay. Well, he sure looks like Charlton Heston. Doesn't mean Sergey was lying. It just means that whoever's passing this information to him was passing it within the context of how they learned it. And it could be that, one, they get through, they get a bunch of funding, because when money moves around, it's great, right? Senators make money, military people make money. The amount of times that I've heard military and politicians get busted for being involved with private sector stuff, feeding them no-bid contracts. It's all over the press. All over the release press, not even a conspiracy that's hidden. I personally believe that, Project Bluebeam, then you have whatever the hell they were calling the alien invasion, and you had the sickness that just went around, maybe half a dozen other options. I actually doubt it, but let's just say 3 more. So half a dozen total. Some point, they got together and figured out a couple things. As Bill Gates told a woman during an interview, when she said, what was the, because he said that vaccines are the most money he's ever made in his entire life. And she said, well, what is the return on investment? And he was busy trying to get to his next sentence, but then he backed up and he just goes, it's like 20x. Holy shit. Put $1 in, you get 20 back. Whoa. And you're putting in 10 billion. Give me a break. That's real money. And you just keep rolling it up and keep diversifying all your cash. You own a piece of everybody who gets to participate in that. So you get to become ridiculously wealthy on a personal level, which will definitely protect you in the meantime. You can buy little militias that protect you as you go out to public events, keeping out everyone else that's having their Second Amendment taken away from them, or at least talking about it. And in the end, it's the one theme that cuts through everyone's religiosity, right? You can be from China and get into that one. You can be from Russia and get into that one, let's just say. Anywhere on earth, you can scare people with a medical emergency. That is where I believe they've taken their plan. I no longer think that the alien one is necessarily the top of their priority list. The only thing that they would do with these other alternate things is to use it as a catalyst. We need a little bit of an adjustment in this area. Now let's just say, because there's a little bit of a gotcha with this one, little Steve Jobs, but wait, there's more. Let's just say that the mechanisms that make us a global society were somehow turned off. How do you get information about what happened in some school somewhere in the United States or in your local area where something bad happened? Because the internet makes it possible. Communication is instantaneous. Do you realize, I mean, I know you do, but if you have the telephone number of anybody in the world, you can call them wherever you are. You could be in your car, stuck in traffic, and call a guy in Zimbabwe, Sri Lanka, Shanghai, Moscow, Paris. It might cost you some extra rates, but you can do it. And what's crazy is you can call anybody in your country instantaneously for whatever your flat fee is for your cell phone membership, right? That's phenomenal. So now let's just say these rumors about cutting off power supplies for a million different reasons. I mean, everything's going into shortages, right? And now you've got America isolated completely. Maybe even have some martial law to help out with crossing borders and that kind of stuff. You don't have a clue what's going on 2 houses down, let alone 2 towns down, 2 states down, 2 countries down. You have no clue anymore. And then they want to call you together, right? They want to get rid of you. They want to control you. And kapoof, here's the show. Tier 2, manipulation. Well, let's think about it. What parts of any major country are secular more than others? And which parts are more religious? The United States, I'll make it real easy for you. The Midwest and the South, very religious. The East Coast and the West Coast, very secular. That's where all the demons exist. That's where all the devil's works are invented. And then they're carried inland for a few little churches of Satan, right? So maybe, if you got everybody to the point they can't communicate unless they literally got on a bicycle and Paul Revere everybody, you run the alien scam over major cities. You run the religious scam over the Midwest. You can just pick it by demographic. Interesting. And now you have it all planned out, right? It's not going to be, if this kind of thing were to happen, I'm just going to make a big educated guess. If they're going to deploy all this technology to make this stuff happen, and it could be satellite technology burning the atmosphere, it could be ground-based stuff that's just a few miles away so you can't see it, like an Abrams tank that can shoot, 50 miles away. Or it's simply aircraft with nose cones that can do all this kind of stuff. Now remember, if I got you cut off, and say where I came from, our town was 10,000 people roughly, a little bit more from here, and from time to time. Next town over was 8 miles away. Next town from that, from my hometown, was 27 miles away, so 19 miles further. Those are the 3 closest towns. And so, over my hometown, I mean, we're not a target or anything because, wow, if you convince us, no big deal. But all you have to have is, like, say, a picture of Christ, a picture of Mary, depending on if it's more Catholic. South America, all should be Catholic. Mary is more important than Jesus kind of thing. Whatever's going to manipulate you. But they have forces ready to swoop in to capture you after you react to it, right? The order out of chaos theory, right? And so you better believe there would be different methodologies. Now, New York City, got a lot of people walking on the street. A lot of people don't own cars in major cities, especially little tight cities like New York City, Chicago, and San Francisco. They're so tiny, probably Portland and Seattle as well. You get to Dallas and Los Angeles, you're talking about really spread out cities. I mean, they're so huge, everybody owns a car. Maybe UFOs are better for them. And what's interesting about the UFO thing is, well, what is Project Bluebeam all about? It's probably something to do with a blue laser beam as opposed to other technologies, but that's all holographic technology and a little bit tougher. You're going to need that for the illusion of a human being flying in clouds. You're going to need that for the pale horse theme, flying through the clouds. But UFOs? I think we know that they've developed some now. Whether they be derived from alien technology or not, for this particular conversation, it doesn't really matter. They've got the gimbal, they've got the tic-tac, and probably a shit ton more. Okay, so they can actually physically fly these things very carefully over Los Angeles, over New York, and all those dense cities, San Francisco, and get a reaction. Then they can chase them with Raptors, F-35s, F-22s, anything, which has got that trauma built into the octave of the engine itself, right? These engines run so loud they can liquefy shit. It's incredible. But there's a polarity difference between seeing God and seeing a UFO, isn't there? For those of you who have taken care of your soul to the best of your ability, the illusion would probably be even more powerful during the nighttime, projecting light into a region. The UFO thing is going to be nothing at night, unless these things glowed or something. But, the glowing light thing is not going to be as amazing as some ship going, like a whole armada of them flying through a major city during the day and getting on just getting into people's eyes. Again, if they've cut off communication especially. You might be able to videotape it if you have some electricity stored up somewhere, but you're not going to be able to send it anywhere, let's just say. One is going to create panic, which is like War of the Worlds stuff from 1938 with Orson Welles. People are going to run inside and be terrified. But if you're a Christian and you think that Jesus is coming back, the angels are dropping down from the sky, then you believe one or two philosophies which both sort of equal a decent eventuality for you. You're about to die and go to heaven. The souls that are, depending on which version of Christianity that you follow, the souls that are buried in graves should be rising up and going up into the sky. Well, if they just do a little GPS map of every single cemetery, holy shit, could you imagine this thing happening where we got a pretty big cemetery just a block from me, or 2 blocks from me, 2 city blocks from me. It's big. It's beautiful. Imagine just them creating these souls lifting up out of that place, man. Now, technically speaking, there should only be 1 soul per grave, but they'll probably run some loopy animation, What's that do? People who hadn't taken care of their souls might be just at home trying to pray, trying to remember a prayer to God, some penance or something, getting out a Holy Bible, crying out their eyes. But they're not necessarily going to get harvested by the government for any safety because it's the second coming. Christ would be coming. So what would be this play number 2? Play number 1 is very exotic for the mind, but what's play number 2 with the Christian ending, the second coming? You're going to have to pay off somehow. If you're just going to kill everybody with some 5G spurt or some other heartbeat technology or directed energy weapon, why even go through the entire process of creating some fake narrative just prior to killing everybody? It'd be a survival mechanism. Would they have the balls to create a new pope? A different one, not the one out of Italy, not the one related to Catholicism, but one that is straight up Jesus on earth that you perhaps don't have access to, but they've got so much deep fake technology and stuff that they're eventually starting to broadcast at a community. Yeah, Christ is here on earth and he's making rounds, and maybe you'll see him over a swap meet in Oklahoma, right? Offhand, I can't think of a way that they could resolve that project. Do I think, again, that they would try it out on paper for 20 years, 50 years? Yeah, absolutely. Why not? They get paid to do nothing, for Christ's sake. That's where I just had a friend of mine call me who was at a location watching some people supposedly work, and she goes, it's really weird. I think a tremendous amount of Americans just get paid to stand around and do nothing. I said, oh, yeah. Oh, most definitely, man. I watched it at the college circuit here in California. I watched this woman who was in charge of HR go out and get fucking plastered at lunch and then come in and stare at her screen, not moving, not touching her keyboard, like an NPC that is waiting for a trigger to go off and do the next part of her. Oh, no, what would you like to do? And she was a mean bitch too, man. Just nuts. With the alien invasion, I immediately see a harvesting mechanism. I also see it could affect virtually every culture in the world. But again, it's a very costly, expensive process that would have to run 24/7. I mean, you'd have to have some narrative that there's some super ship somewhere. I mean, again, they could. There's been plenty of movies that have done this, right? Big field out in the middle of like Wyoming or Kansas, and there's a big egg over that. And imagine that they say that they quarantined away the area such that you can't get close to it, like Devil's Tower and Close Encounters, but there's nothing really there. But they're broadcasting some live CG thing that they've probably pre-rendered years ahead to make sure it's absolutely perfect. Maybe just rebroadcasting pre-rendered footage that you can't get in to confirm. In the meanwhile, they're taking all your rights away, saying we got to come under a one world government. What other technologies have we seen in the last 10 years that could feed into Project Bluebeam? Well, the biggest one was you'll remember like 5 to 10 years ago, about 8 probably tops, there was the sirens coming out of nowhere, coming out of the sky, and it would cascade through a forest. There was one where it was some firefighters that doing those wilderness fires, and it's like some crazy horns blowing, very weird, demonic, bizarre horns blowing, kind of all 1/5 off like carnival music. This, and then there was the original footage that came out of Russia, although somebody in Russia figured out it was a soundtrack from a movie. But very interestingly enough, those videos kind of disappeared, at least the ones that called out that problem, that it was a movie soundtrack. And then new ones appeared with a similar sound with no debunking, and then they changed it for American videos. Now, could they create some weapon that could shake the atmosphere and make a sound? And the answer is hell yeah, they could. Hell yes. If you have air to breathe, then they have a medium by which a HARP antenna or some other technology could just resonate the air and make this horrible sound. I would actually wager that it was a mistake initially, and then they went, wow, that's kind of cool, right? Imagine what we could do with that. So you're getting a visual stimulation of something, alien or religion, and then you get an audio backup. And audio, we know, has been the technique for entrancing human beings and creating different states of the mind. So you're pushing in a state of suggestibility. We also have this network of devices that make our cell phones work. Well, that can get into the sympathetic harmonic technique of putting thoughts in your brain. Fear, comfort, depends on what the narrative is as to whether or not they want you to react one way or the other. This three-dimensional matrix to control your mind is in place already, in my opinion. But now, let's think about this for 1 second. We are in a short attention span theater world, and we're talking about them trying to affect a change in the world based on some narrative that they launch on us. Okay, I don't know about you, I'm having problems getting friends to just pay attention for any length of time during a normal conversation. You're the asshole if you happen to talk about the same thing for more than 5 minutes. I mean, it's weird. And when this stuff was being incubated, especially by the people that may have told Sergey about this entire theory, even though we had short attention spans in the previous decade, Jesus Christ, the attention span of a 1985 youth in America, I can't speak for any other country, must have been 100 times longer than the Michael Bay children of today, the TikTok children of today, the movie meme kids of today. So it could be that the very fabric of the human mind that would be able to ingest this entire scam no longer exists. So my question is there a slightly different kind of unforeseen benefit of a short attention span population with these narratives? I think the answer is no for me personally right now. Maybe you guys have a different view on that. But in order to create fear, and in order to create, problem, reaction, solution, order out of chaos theories, You have to get the result fast. I mean, you have to scare the shit out of people and then get them to give you their freedoms like that. If you don't, then what was the point? It didn't last long enough. They're doing crazy orchestrated events in the United States to take our guns. It seems like every time we think something's real, it's super duper fake. I mean, it's just amazing. But they're trying to create the events that took away guns from Canada, New Zealand, and Australia in the United States. All right, well, it's the wild, wild west. We got to start organizing and defending ourselves against that stuff. But the people have done an amazing job just getting in there and autistically ripping everything apart, all the lies. Even soldiers from the United States military made videos picking apart the last one that we had on camera. Now, I said earlier that whatever technology they would be using to create holograms would require a tremendous amount of energy for a prolonged exposure of anything. It depends on where this scam would be coming from. Now, I want to run off to the Project Bluebeam that I saw like 10 years ago, which was, for some reason, someone believing that the moon was being projected into the sky. It's not inconceivable to me that something like that could be done for some reason, but it would be then more of a Matrix-y Truman Show with Ed Harris up there than anything. It also happens to coincide with an eclipse of the sun, so if it is a projected entity, how is it then blinding out the sunlight when it gets in front of it? So there's a bit of a little logistical problem with that. The thing for me is I do not understand why the moon would be something they'd want in the sky to begin with. The moon has been seen for a very, very long time before any known discovery of electricity in the terms of sort of the circuitry that we have today. Not necessarily the original pre-dynastic Egyptians, whoever they were, whatever race they were, who built the pyramids and harnessed electricity that way, plus a lot of other cultures, especially some Eurasian cultures, who also seem to have a command of electricity and perhaps even built vehicles that may have achieved a zero-gravity traveling mechanism, right? What I think is fascinating about the moon concept of it being projected in the sky is I want you to remember the power of metaphor. Master filmmakers understand metaphor. Rookie filmmakers have no clue that shit exists. Give an example. In the movie Casablanca, I was talking to my father today on Father's Day. Had an amazing conversation, but he was saying, I don't quite get why people love Casablanca so much. He goes, I just think it's kind of an average film. And I said, well, I would have agreed with you 100%, except that I took a writing class 3 times from Robert McKee, the god of all screenwriting. And he takes you through on the 3rd day or 4th day when I first took him, the importance of that movie. And in that film, if you ever see it, it's about a place in like Morocco, is that right? Or is there the northwest wing of Africa, was seized by the Nazis, run by the French, and you went there to get a passport to fly the hell out of town to escape the occupation of the Nazis. And of course the Nazis knew. Humphrey Bogart runs a nightclub gambling joint there, and he kind of is a weird, like, seasoned dude. Somehow he looks angry a little bit, and so we get to see a few days of him running this place, and then all of a sudden, this beautiful woman, Ingrid Bergman, walks in with her husband, and you see Rick, played by Humphrey Bogart, look at her and go, "Oh my God, what is she doing in my place?" And he used to have a relationship with her. They were about to get married, and on one particular day before the Germans were taking over Paris, he said, "We're going to meet you at the Paris subway. We're going to get the hell out of here before they get here." And she doesn't show up. But up until that moment, she was totally in love with him. So he's like, "What the hell happened? You just stood me up at the altar, man." Metaphorically, right? Come to find out, she thought her husband was dead because he was part of the French underground. Turns out he wasn't dead, and she was notified the night before, the day of, or whatever, she's supposed to meet Humphrey, that he's still alive. So she said, "I got to go with my husband. I'm married to this guy. He's still alive. It's I can't marry anybody else. It's law, right?" But instead of sending him a letter, that explained all that. She just didn't show up. And so when she shows up at his gin joint to get a pass to get the hell out, he doesn't know if he wants to help her. He's pissed at her. He needs to resolve all these issues. But metaphorically, the imagery system within the movie is important. And there's a point to this. If you pay attention to the movie, there's a bunch of like volumetric light creating shadows on people. All the shadows in this movie are bars. Bars to symbolize the metaphor of being trapped. Even though Ingrid Bergman's character is with her husband, she's only out of this nowadays because of obligation, because he's so into the revolution and stuff, romance, whatever. Every shot that she's in this movie with her husband, there's an object between the two of them. So if they sit down at a table, there's like a light on the table that's between the two of them. They're always separate. She wears a dress with bars on it like a prisoner at one point because she's a prisoner in the movie. So all these subliminal things of metaphorical imagery are showing up in this film. And there's a billion of other things, but those are just some easy ones that if you ever see a shot from it, you're going to go, oh my God, he's right? Mr. McKee's right. So what's interesting about this is that we know that there's two halves to explain this. We know that everyone's waking up. We know that a lot of people are still, the people that aren't willing to wake up are the people that perceive that the information that they're getting about the world they thought was there means that they have failed. They have failed to pick the wrong side. So instead of just switching sides and getting on the side of truth and common law, do no harm, they're doubling down on the wrong side, thus creating an infinite loop of evil, basically, that doesn't pan out, which is a lie. And they're all going crazy. That's why you get these Karens in the world, right? You got these nutbags that are going absolutely berserk. They're a victim of the situation of our society. And believe me, this ain't a mistake. This is not a mistake psychosis. It is the deep state creating all this chaos. They are redlighting every single thing you will possibly latch onto, from Roe versus Wade to trainees teaching your kids something in school. I mean, it's all in there. It's just whatever makes you react is what they're trying to throw at you. Okay? And 100 other examples. But now, what if you're waking up to a greater truth? You're waking up to a greater truth. But you're getting the metaphorical truth first, not the factual truth. And so there's a bunch of questions about whether or not we're in a matrix all of a sudden. I can't tell you. I just had this conversation yesterday evening. Young girl, I don't know, 25 years old. She was an Art Bell fan. Doesn't really like the new Coast to Coast, but she's talking about Matrix stuff. The dude who plays guitar at this restaurant, he's standing right with us, and he's like, yeah, wow, Matrix. Yeah, I've heard of that, and then they all go into what they've heard. They've heard Elon Musk talk about it on Joe Rogan. And fuck, man, if Elon Musk is the first person you ever heard the Matrix theory from, I am very sorry. But again, with quantum computing coming up here, within 50 years, when those computers are now executing, let's say in 50 years, if they can execute 100 qubits with 100% accuracy, the simulations we can create for VR, AR, and video games in general will be indistinguishable from reality. With metaverse coming, it'll be better than reality. Better being defined as more of a video game. Everything will be frosting and candy everywhere. That room that you always wanted to go into with Gene Wilder and Willy Wonka, you will wake up in that world and you will spend your day in that world and you will go to bed in that world. You will own nothing and you'll be very happy. So imagine that a lot of these things are popping out, and flat Earth is a big part of that too. Flat Earth, if it wasn't flat, or if it is flat, is more telling you that the reality that you're in isn't the one you think you're in. They tell you that you're spinning, but all the scientists prove that we're not. But then they implode because they're like, I don't know how to explain the universe if we're not moving. I don't know how to explain the universe. When we look at all the redshifts of all the stars in space, Earth is in the center of the universe. And of course, they come up with these ridiculous excuses of why that's the case. We're all on the surface of a balloon that's inflating, said Stephen W. Hawking. And everyone's just like, oh, man, that tastes good. Man, I don't have to think at all. He's thinking for me. Where am I now? Who am I now? Who do I serve now? Cancel. Boink. Get your brain back. Get that dollar back out of the machine. Don't buy that product, right? I think we're waking up. I think we're waking up huge. And your brain, because of previous experiences and the way you're configured neurologically, is latching on to slightly different flavors of this metaphor, that you're not where you think you are, that you're not as constrained as you think you are. Most of these metaphors are like, what matters the most in this world? What matters? We're probably here for a reason. My thing, you can hear me gravitate over, 700 episodes. I'm gravitating towards definitely some sort of matrix. I do believe that there's, some solid state mass that my simulated body can't get through. Maybe that's because I don't know how to bend the spoon. Maybe it's because it's really there. Don't know. Manifest destiny seems to be very, very powerful. The more you believe, the more it seems to happen. The context of the event prior to you wanting to believe one thing or the other heavily controls your ability to manifest destiny. I'm going to repeat a story, but I haven't repeated this in a couple of years, so here's a refresher course for those devoted listeners. I always wanted to role play when I was a kid, but I was the only child, and I moved too much to have any friends to do it. So I didn't start role playing until I joined electronic arts, and my buddies were all role players from childhood. And so I was chomping at the bit, baby. And we played Dungeons and Dragons, first edition, maybe second edition. And there was a scenario where if you haven't played this game before, the way the dice work, because they're all really super cool looking dice, is that you roll a 20-sided die to see if your attack on a different being actually connects. And if you roll, it depends on the being, how high you have to roll from 1 to 20. If you connect, then you roll for damage, and it's just different die. It depends on the creature at what other shapes of dice you do, but the 20-sider is definitely the go die to see if you connect. Now, I just said that context of the event drastically controls your ability to manifest. Now, I have rolled 2 20s in my lifetime where I called it out ahead of time. This is going to be a 20, and I haven't had a third experience where I called it out as a 20 and it showed up something else. Only 2. But both those events proceeded with a bizarre, complete control of the universe, as if the whole universe collapsed upon me in a sphere. Big enough for my friends to be in, but mostly around me, and I felt 1,000% control of the universe, and I rolled these 20s. Both events were based on the context of what I was doing. But there's only one that's really useful. I could tell you the second one, but it's the same kind of scenario. We were in this underground tunnel, and it's like a tunnel that's all lit up by the illuminating moss. That's how we got light in there. And I'm this wood elf character, and I hadn't seen any wood elves since I left my homeland, so I'm a little homesick. My other buddy's like a gray elf, and then we have all kinds of other races. So the GM, or the DM, the Dungeon Master, knows that I kind of hot to see one of my own kind. So we're sailing down this little river in the middle of this cavern, and the cavern's gigantic. So at one point there's a clearing, and it looks like there's a bar, hotel kind of dwelling notched out of the mountain. Looks really like the treasury in the Middle East, the one at the end of Indiana Jones kind of thing. So we hop out and go over there, and the place is in disarray. Someone had just recently ransacked this place, and there's a ton of dead beings of all kinds. Behind the bar is a female wood elf that has been brutally raped and killed. My buddy, who's this incredible brain, describes this in the most cinematic detail you could possibly imagine. And I am really role-playing this character, man. And so I'm furious as a player, as my character. She is dead. I bury her. I clean her up and bury her. And then we get back in this boat. And whoever did it's gone. But this looks fairly recent. So we're feeling like just down the way a little bit, we're going to find him. And sure enough, we go down, and it's a goblin tribe. It's like the taller 6-footers. It's kind of like a Klingon kind of thing. But anyway, we get down there, and there's a ton of them, and they're all partying and having a good time. Half of them are drunk. And there's this one dude on on a throne. And he's all decked out, and he's the dude in charge. And so I'm feral at this point with anger for this character. And it's playing out perfectly. My buddy led us in great. And so as soon as the boat gets close enough to the shore, I take the initiative and do something a little crazy. I don't check with my friends to see what we should do. I hop off this boat, and I'm this big, gnarly wood elf. And I carry a sword as opposed to a bow. And I just start charging at this guy. And he's like, "You do?" And I'm like, "Yep." And I'm going to try to cut this guy in half, right? And he goes, "Okay." And he goes, "Okay, so you're close enough, swing." So I grab this 20-sided die. Now I'm passionate about this kill. I'm passionate about avenging this poor girl's death, and as well as being my own kind. And I could have grabbed this chick and taken her with me, right? Start a little family of like little wood elves, right? And she's dead. And so I'm rolling this die in my hand, and I'm not even thinking about calling the 20 to be like a show off or just, like watch me, because I wouldn't do that. There's only 1 in 20 chance I'm going to hit the 20. I wouldn't, mathematically, I'm not stupid. But I start doing this, and I start seeing this distorted sphere around me. And it wasn't a voice in my ear that said, "You're going to roll a 20. It was just that I had gripped on to every molecule in this universe at that moment. And I'm swinging this die, and I looked at my buddy, and I said, "This is going to be a 20. Almost as if I just know this is going to take place. I toss it down. Sure enough, 20. Then I roll damage, and it's double damage when you roll a 20, and you almost drop your sword. Usually, you have to roll if you roll a 1, you have to see if you even dropped your sword because you swung it so shitty. So anyway, I roll a 20. I roll massive damage, and then my buddy goes, "Yeah, you just cut him absolutely in half." And he goes, "Now nobody knows what to do, because just like the dogs in Fifth Element, if the leader's gone, they're done." And then we just mopped everybody up. That happened one more time with the demon. And so later that night, though, the first time I talked to my buddy, I said, "Dude, I controlled the dice. I mean, that was, what the hell?" And my buddy just looks at me and goes, "Yeah, it happens every once in a while." He goes back to playing. So then like a couple weeks later, I'm like, "What do you mean by that, dude? Like, is this some supernatural thing you're just blowing off?" He goes, "Yeah, I don't know how it works, man." He goes, "But sometimes you just know, and you never miss, you never false call. When it happens, you have that feeling, and it's there." Okay. Why tell that crazy story in the middle of Project Bluebeam? Well, imagine that the rich people of the world who have amassed all the knowledge. Alexander's library was not burned down, as well as 100 other ones that you didn't even know existed. All the gurus, all the priests, all the people taking psychotropic drugs, where the Christmas tree came from, the mushrooms, the red mushrooms with the white dots on them, DMT, everything. They're loosening up their brain, or other people before them did. And they run billions of dollars through things like remote viewing projects, through DMT projects, and the data coming out is phenomenal. And what's the data saying? Categorically, the reality that you accepted as a child, it's just an impression of where you think you are. This is truly a consensus reality. What if you're waking up to the metaphor of all of this? You're not getting the schematic to the universe. You don't have a time bandit map to know where to jump through these little black doors and go anywhere you want. You didn't work for God to take the time bandit map from him. If you haven't seen Time Bandits, go see it. Terry Gilliam, one of his best first movies ever. Now watch the video that takes us one step further. And it talks about this thing that I have mentioned several times in videos. I don't think I've ever done one that's 100% on target. But it has to do with low vibration human beings and high vibration human beings. You've heard me talk about this before. What's the difference? Well, just like a computer with low megahertz, you can process information to the degree you actually run electrons through a processor. Higher megahertz means you can think about more stuff in a finite amount of time. Any system can go forever, but you want data now. Well, if you're interested in where you are, if you're interested in what the truth is, with a capital T, having a high vibration body and mind, aka mechanism to interpret the messages coming from your soul, is extremely important. The more you injure your body with bad food, inflammation, sugars, and all this other kind of stuff, you drink too much energy drinks, you get these crashes, all that kind of stuff. You're just not on your game. You haven't figured out your particular marathon of existence. So you're not the highest vibration of yourself you could be. But a lot of you have reached this, at least a beautiful sweet spot on the bat, where it just has that home run sound every time you have a thought. It's that sound, man. You don't even have to be a pro baseball player to know when a dude hits a home run. It just has this less is more tap on the bat. Big giant tap, well, that's usually a foul. That one little sweet nooky sound that sounds different than all the other taps. That's how you want your brain to work. I think the only reason why any of you listen to me is because you're in the same game as I'm in. You're starting to wake up. We're all on different timetables of having awakened. Plus, based on your previous experience, and some of you woke up way before me, like 15 years, 20 years before me. You may not have had the information we have today, but man, you have a mind that just saw it. Maybe you had an uncle or a grandmother or something that said, son, shit and shinola, they don't exist, something like that. But you're trying to figure it out. You're not trying to disrespect God in any way, shape, or form. You feel like there's a better way to serve God the more that you can understand how, why, when, and where He made this place. Some people turn to Scripture. Well, what is a more concentrated collection of metaphor than the Bible, than the Christian Bible? Oh, there's a lot of imitators, but there's only one Christian Bible for unbelievable infinite metaphor, almost like a fractal of metaphor within a particular verse or chapter. Now, Matthew, the book of Matthew, has some verses that relate to Project Bluebeam, which has to do with probably one of the best areas of the Bible that covers Christ being asked several times when He's going to come back and what parameters are around His return. It's just important to remember. The bottom line is no one's going to know when it's going to occur. But the mezzanine warning that Christ spent, it could be Francis Bacon making it all up, but let's just give it some holy truth of the universe. Say you're more of an atheist or something. The idea is that there will be false prophets, like an antichrist. And that just means that if you're an atheist and you're hearing me talk, well, that just means that someone's going to tell you that you've won and you've actually lost. Someone's going to tell you that they're the hero, but they're the villain. But the inverse is also very, very true. When you find the Messiah, which could be simply in your heart, they will tell you that it's not there. It's unequivocally not there. But now remember, I won't tell what movie this is in so I don't ruin it for anybody, but Kaiser Sose. The old line, it's way before that movie was ever written, the greatest illusion, the greatest trick that the devil ever pulled on man is to make you think he doesn't exist. The inverse is true too. The greatest trick is for someone evil to convince you there is no good in the world. You're just stuck here. You're the elephant that was trained not to pull on the rope with the spike in the ground. No matter how big the elephant gets, he still remembers his training when he was a baby and he couldn't get that thing out of the ground. So he just said, well, if I'm tied up with this stake, I know I can't get out of the ground. I can't leave this area. What would be more of an Antichrist move than Project Bluebeam? Faking a second coming. Wouldn't it be funny if they tried to pull that off and God said, okay, enough is enough, right? The reason why you won't be able to predict the second coming is because a fake one's going to go first. And then everyone who gets affected by it will either think it's already occurring, which it's not, or they'll lose their faith because it was a scam. And they'll lose their faith in God, and then all of a sudden God shows back up and goes, I'm actually here. And all those who are participating in this little Bluebeam Antichrist thing, you're gone. I'm going to take you first. We're going to give the people on earth a rest. So we're going to give you 1,000 years of bliss because you deserve it for making it this far. Be a nice little scenario, wouldn't it? What I don't understand, personally, is that I do believe they have the power to wipe us off this planet in more ways than we could possibly imagine. Even regardless of how intellectual you are, how scientific you are, they've thought of just so many absurd, amazing, probably simple ways and horrible ways. We know that's what they want. They've built monuments to tell us that that's what they want. But for some strange reason, they're taking their sweet time, aren't they? They're doing all this crazy legislation, using panties on your face and other passports that you need, like Nazi Germany time frame stuff. Why even wait? Why not pull the trigger? Destroy whatever group of people you want to destroy, and then whoever's left, and they ain't going to be saying shit. Could we be wrong about some of the aggressive nature of them? Do they lose battles and that we're unaware of that pause their plan? Are they interested in the suffering part of the game because it's part of their Moloch religion? The video I saw about the high and low vibration was a girl that was just riffing. I very much appreciate her. And she was just saying that, you know, and there's other paradigms outside of Bluebeam that talk about this, which is trapping you in a low vibration world. Whether you're high or not, whether you're low or not, you're just here. And this notion, this is a recent narrative that has it. I've seen lectures go back to the 90s on this that were videotaped. I think that probably went back even further. But once technology started to eclipse the average human being's understanding, which is why you get so many videos that are falsely categorized. If it's not just straight up clickbait, it's a housewife or some dude not knowing what a rocket launch looks like, and they think it's a UFO in the sky. They simply don't have the knowledge to understand it. But once we started hitting this threshold, which technically speaking was probably during the NASA fake moon missions, I mean, they're starting to get to a point where the whole category of science is beyond the average human being's ability to understand. And as they continually dumbed us down, like Charlotte Iserby talked about in her book, The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America, we lost the ability to have traction with the ever-increasing technology. Being a person in technology, my entire life, really. My dad was building Heathkit televisions and stereo components when I was 8 years old. I remember sitting in the garage, it's like freaking 50 degrees, and watching him build a television from scratch, right? Looking at all the capacitors, you know, and like, what is that? One day I'm going to know, and I did. I figured it out. By my mid-teens, my dad and I were fixing VCRs for money on the side. It was funny, right? Since then, I've gotten into all kinds of components, studying ARM chip design, all this other kind of stuff. And so when you have at least the basics understood, the exponential implementation of those basics starts to become palatable, meaning if you were to build a warp engine, let's just say, Zephyr and Cochrane kind of stuff, right? You got a warp engine in front of you. And this particular first version of it might hit warp. You can then conceive of immediately hitting warp 2, warp 3, warp 4, which is supposed to be an exponential duplication of the speed. So warp 2 is twice warp 1, but warp 3 could be 4x, right? It's kind of like the resolution on television. 4K is 4 times 1080p. Okay, so you see the capability of technology running away. Now, of course, in the private sector, when we invent something that sweeps the floor better in the kitchen, we do our own little Swiffer in the 80s or something, and we never market it or whatever. Okay, we're good with that little advancement. Unless there's another challenge, we don't move that technology forward anymore. We don't need it to be any better. We're looking for X amount of savings in time and cost. We're good. But the military doesn't do that, do they? The elite of the world don't do that, do they? I recently watched The Island of Dr. Moreau, which I thought I had seen. And when you watch Val Kilmer's documentary about his life, he has some really amazing little tidbits about talking to Marlon Brando at that set. But I finally saw the movie. It's a quirky, weird movie. It would have been phenomenal to either remake it in the modern age, which I think that they might have, but I haven't seen it. But they really need our CG capabilities to make this movie right. That with Avatar technology could be freaky as shit, right? But you know, splicing together human beings with other beings. Tigers. There's the Tiger Baby video out there on YouTube. It's disturbingly real. I tried to look at, I know a lot of conditions that babies can have that make them birth really strange. Radiation poisoning being one of the most infinitely complex outcomes of a child, which is just devastating to the heart. But this little guy looks like he has a paw in it for a left hand. And I kept rewatching, and he looks like he has like half of a lion face. And what's interesting is it looked like the baby survived the birthing process. Who carried the baby? I don't know. But it's either the most elaborate hoax. It could be a CG thing. I mean, you know, guys are so good. The freaking tiger in Life of Pi is not real, people. Mind-blowing. But this baby had nipples down its front, like it's a girl. And so, wow, I mean, the level of detail, if this thing isn't real, is really off the chain. But that's an example of, and there's a real island, and I don't want to say that wrong. I used to say Jekyll. It's not Jekyll, but it's the one off, I think, the east coast of America that is rumored to have had these kind of experiments done. But that's just maybe some kook or some low-level project done by people in like the Gilded Era versus super scientific laboratories really trying to pull this thing off, combining us with spiders and all kinds of weird shit. Well, it's like the movie Aliens 4. Sigourney Weaver goes in the lab with all these hybrided aliens. And they're all screwed up and dead, but they're all in these big jars because they want to see how, when bad, so they can continue studying the evolutionary mistakes that they made so they get it right. I think mankind is metaphorically waking up. And I think we're sensing the algorithms of the greater thought. Let me give you an example, too, because I used to say this example a lot in the first 2 seasons, but it has to do with, and this has been poo-pooed by some folks, but I tell you, I've got some very educated friends in Hollywood that are writers, that are famous, that have confirmed this to me. It was called the 10 Monkey Experiment. Some people come to me and say, that never happened, da-da-da-da. But it has to do with really hundreds of monkeys in this agrodome, and they took a monkey out and taught it how to get a food pellet by completing a little mechanism. And it took several weeks to figure this thing out. They'd show it to him, but it was complex. It was like, somebody had rumored it was like tying a knot or something strange, something more elaborate. But the monkey figures it out. They put it out in the wild. Then they monitor where it is through tag GPS kind of stuff. I mean, not really GPS, but just watching where it is. And they pick a monkey out that monkey never had any contact with, put it in the chamber, half the time to learn. They kept doing this until within 10 monkeys, everybody knew. But they don't have a vocabulary, right? They don't go up to each other and shake their hands together and show each other how to do it. It suggested the theory, which I have experienced several times learning things with people, that when you're in close proximity with someone, you're transmitting information whether you like it or not. Makes complete sense. Your brains are compatible, usually, although that might be a fleeting thing nowadays. But you're having a complex mesh of thought, and you're broadcasting it like an RF wave out of your head. Why do you think people feel you staring at them from across the room? Because you're projecting thoughts at them. There is a medium by which your thoughts are looking at them, and they feel it. They may not know it's exactly you if they turn around in an airport and go, who the fuck is looking at me? You can just look away. Oh, it wasn't me. But why am I mentioning this? Well, one more confirmation that I think it's real is when I was learning instruments as a kid. I would be with like these, badass guitar players, and they'd be teaching me how to play a lick. Because they all know, man, if you're going to learn an instrument, it's much better to learn your favorite song first, then learn your next favorite song, and make it difficult. Screw this like level 1 bullshit. Pick your favorite Dawkins song, whatever it is, and play it, right? But I found this weird anomaly. When I was with them, very little guidance verbally. And of course I get to see their hands, and I'd play. And I'd say, okay, well, you need to muffle it a little less here, more there. And yeah, hold your hand like this and do that. You get your frets proper. And it would just magically happen within a few seconds with these guys when I was with them. Next day I have my guitar at home and I'm trying to practice. Oh shit, it's a lot more difficult. Go back with them. And, I'm having a problem. Well, yeah, I'm not having a problem anymore. It's as if I was stealing their essence for learning the instrument. They already had it figured out, and all I was doing was stealing their cerebellum, right? And being able to do it. Why mention that? Reason being is this. What if you were one of these clandestine security guys or intelligence dudes, I should say, and you know that this shit is real? Forget someone at the Mason Lodge telling you that this is going on, but they're thinking about it. Well, let me give you a test. Okay, so you wake up and you have a normal day. You take your shower, you put your clothes on, you go to work. It's a good day. It's a good day at work. You feel like you really accomplished something. Then you came home, put your head on your pillow. Man, you sleep like a baby because, man, today was a good damn day. Just like Ice Cube said, right? Then someone teaches you something insanely cool. You learn something cool. I don't know what it could be. For me, it would be somebody showing me some new fake moon footage video. It's like, man, no one's ever seen this. Watch this. You can't show this to anybody. I'm going to show you so you know you're right. Boom, boom, boom. They show me something brand new I've never seen. All the astronauts from the Apollo 11 mission, wink, wink, nudge, nudging, all kinds of conversation. It's just the best video that puts everything else to shame. But then they say, okay, so you can't say anything to anybody about that. But I just want you to know, in your heart of hearts, you're right. More than you already know you're right. Now, let's say I learned that at 10 o'clock in the morning. Okay, so let me ask you, what do you think is going on in my brain for the rest of the day and the days to come and the days to come and the days to come? I'm having a circus of celebration in my mind that I saw that information. It's like when I saw Walt at Disneyland. Amazing feeling for many days and weeks and months to come. Now, you're in line with me at some restaurant. We're waiting to get our food orders in or whatever. We're in an In-N-Out Burger or whatever. And I'm just sitting there beaming behind you. I don't even care if it takes 20 years to get in line to get my hamburger. I'm just like, wow, wow, wow. But you're sitting there of high vibration. Instead of really feeling I'm staring at you, you don't really care about that emotion or that feeling. You're thinking, man, for some reason I'm thinking about the moon. This is really weird. And I'm putting all kinds of stuff together in my brain. Of course, this and then that, and this attaches. It wasn't even in the video, but there's all kinds of other things that totally jive with the thing I saw. But you're in front of me, and you're starting to put stuff together too. You don't even know how to really verbalize it, but you're getting all the metaphor, all the mechanisms, all the mechanics of what I'm talking about without really knowing. Okay. So now you pull a global scam on the whole world in 2020? Bunch of doctors and scientists know it's all bullshit. Let alone the Al Gore one from 2006, December. Bunch of people taking paychecks to fuck the entire world over. Oh, there's plenty of people that know, or plenty of people that think it's real. But there's a bunch of people that know it's fake. And those of us with high vibration brains might just be picking up on the actual metaphorical truth, the algorithm of truth that's there. And so take everything that's been bothering you in the last several years, maybe even a couple decades, secret societies, matrix conversations, maybe the moon's a very specific one, it's just fascinating. But you're starting to wake up. So now with that knowledge, I want you to think about all the stuff that's been churning in your head, the stuff you can't stop thinking about, whether or not you have a new piece of information about flat earth or not. You're just like, something's wrong. We're not on a fucking globe. I could just feel it. Or I could feel it. We're not feeling it, right? I can just feel it. And then you get your Karens who are like, I need to believe that everything that is basically the base package of reality that I have been sold as a child, I need that to be real because I can't have anything else in my life unravel. So instead of going online and engaging in an open-minded conversation with someone as a high vibration intellectual person, I'm going to use my time to be angry. I'm going to be stuck in that first stage of Kubler-Ross, anger. There's never going to be any negotiation, acceptance, denial. Maybe denial and anger just go back between those two, right? But you turn yourself into a vicious person, which means you're losing the game, which means the quality of your soul as you return back to a creator, it's not as good as it could be if you're like, well, you know what? I don't fucking know. I don't know. I can't say it's one way or the other, and neither can the other guy. The other guy just is sensing that something isn't the way that they've been taught. Well, why don't we all just get agnostic for the moment about that particular fact or suggestion, theory, get along, and conversate? Because if we conversate, we might figure out something new. That's why I like engaging in these conversations, proposing that maybe a bunch of what we concern ourselves with, including, Bluebeam kind of projects, have some truth to them. Were projects at one point in time. Were financed heavily. People did find out about these things. I mean, again, I got a buddy that has a best friend that's been to the Bohemian Grove twice. So I'm sitting there going, well, what happened? He said, he says he only goes for like 3 days. He said that they just bring tons of vintage cigars and super eclectic booze and just drink and smoke the whole time in the woods. Never saw any of the other weird shit. He missed the ceremony, the opening ceremony, which probably would have freaked his shit out. I'm guessing that that's supposedly not happening anymore, but I'm supposing that you don't get invited to the opening ceremony unless you're willing to wear a hooded Ku Klux Klan outfit, right? But how many videos have you seen in the last several years where people are just talking about this sort of mysterious awakening? Now, what's interesting about that is that they typically, and there's nothing wrong with this, they have a bias to how they're interpreting the awakening. There's that letter movement out there, which I think now Kash Patel has completely dispelled, thank God. And they'll see the awakening within the number movement. And so it's all biasly inside of some political paradigm. We might be a little bit more existential about it and talk about the fabric of the universe. Just remember the woman who went to the show here in Orange County, California, some trade show, and she was shown something. She said that someone showed her something. She called her mother after this event, and she said, "My God, Mom, we live in a matrix. I was just shown proof that we live in a matrix." She apparently told the same thing to her husband, but that was in voicemail or something. Then she flies to San Jose to go to a conference, I think maybe in San Francisco, but whatever. She disappears. Her family can't get in contact with her after she talks to her mother and then leaves these voicemails. And she's devastated in a way it sounded, but also probably is dealing with a level of information, whatever. I don't know what the hell you could show someone. This woman was a very successful CEO of a web company. She was an American out of like Minnesota, farming all the web work to Pakistan or something. She's making shit tons of money. She's about to receive an award for female success up in the Bay Area. She disappears. No one can find her. And then she shows up dead in the back of a car in a neighborhood, like any average neighborhood in your town, where people walk by with their dogs all the time. If there was a car that stayed there for a week, the residents of that yard would notice, especially in San Jose, and they would have looked inside and found a woman sleeping, but she was dead. No cause of death, no abuse, no rape, no bludgeoning to the head, no bleeding, no nothing. She just died in the back of this car. Well, I guess there could be a couple theories to that, right? Whoever showed her maintained contact with her in a secret way, a surveillance way, and realized that she was telling people things and figured the best way to get rid of her is just to extinguish her somehow. Again, her husband, as far as I understand, has never found a cause of death. I'm not even sure what happened to her body after that. The other one is that she just took off and transcended, left her body because this isn't a reality in the first place. Maybe she was offered the opportunity to leave and just said, well, this is too good to pass up. Anyway, I wanted to go through this because it's been a little project out there that I've always heard about. Again, if you do your research, it's very difficult to find on YouTube nowadays. There's more music called Project Bluebeam than anything else. Why is that? Is it just so boring nobody wants to get into it? I don't know. It's fixation on projecting a fake moon in the sky. It doesn't even begin to touch the true theory of it. If you look it up online, you get Sergey Monastes and not Project Bluebeam just as its own page. It's inside his bio. Interesting. Do I think it's going to happen anytime soon? No. But let's keep our ears perked up, and if anything like that happens, you may want to hold out for a little bit, calling out victory to God. Let something else happen. I think you'll know. I think you'll know if the real second coming would ever occur. And boy, did a bunch of the world have religion wrong if that was the case, right? Anyway, if you haven't been to deepthoughtsradio.com, please go. I fixed all the category lists from scratch, created some better categories, or mixed a couple together. Hopefully that'll help you find what you're looking for if you haven't seen every single video. But on the website is audio, video, all social media, a all-new remastered Season 1, a store with at least one new shirt in the last month. And for those of you who want to support me on Patreon, thank you so much. Patreon folks get the videos, get the audio nowadays, because they're more interested in audio at this point. The second I get this thing mixed down inside the editing bay as a video, then it takes a long time to get the video encoded on my end, then it takes a long time to upload, then it takes a while to encode. So if you get on that, you get these things ahead of time. Plus, you get a connection with me that's very uninterrupted by a lot of the other chatter going on other platforms. But for all of you contacted me through Facebook and your amazing comments, I really appreciate it. But anyway, take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.